Good Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Former Browns quarterback Johnny Manziel with his thoughts on Shedeur Sanders and his play so far.
I think a lot of guys in that position, I think he, to be honest, handled it as good as you possibly can with a smile on your face and like just letting everything kind of play itself out, because it's not easy to sit there, you know, early in the draft process. Him and Dion sitting there like, we're going to be off the board in the first 5 picks.
Yeah.
And you sit there for 5 rounds. That's a highly like anxious spot to be in. I mean, even for me, sitting and just like waiting till the end of the first round was like, I don't think I would have been able to handle it the way that he did. It's mad props to him to be able to you know, face that and just take it straight on.
To ask you a question, what do you think like is the main reason he dropped that far?
Man, I don't know.
Quarterback opinion.
As you like hear and like just kind of see reports about like certain things, like, you know, maybe he's a little bit too loud at times, like the quiet guy, you know, the Geno type of guy who just comes in, is kind of under the radar. Like, you know, I'm watching rookie minicamp stuff and they're like detailing every single report of every single throw. Like, it's fucking crazy. It's rookie minicamp. Like, you're
every
sitting there,
stat,
every single snap of red zone, how much shit. So it's just like, it just adds that question of just like, you're getting peppered with so much shit. He's getting an opportunity now in Cleveland with a quarterback situation that, you know, honestly, he can come out of and win the job. I think he'll do well. I really do. I think the kid works really hard. I think he loves the game of ball. And when it comes down to it, if you have a guy like that loves the game, obviously growing up around it his whole life, you know, I think he'll be successful.
I agree, bro.
So that's what Browns fans want. Johnny Manziel to give Shedeur Sanders his stamp of approval. This is from The Herd on FS1. Colin Cowherd, Matt Hasselbeck on what they've seen in Shedeur Sanders so far.
So I just said this about Shedeur. I don't know if he's going to be a great franchise quarterback, but when I hear this, well, he is playing against backups, and my take is so are 50 other guys in camp, and they're not completing close to 80%. There is something about him setting a college accuracy record and then going to camp and doing it again. And I've said this before. One of the first things I look for is your best college trait. Does it translate? So when Tebow was a great athlete in college, then went to the NFL and couldn't outrun defensive ends, I'm like, that's trouble because he's not great in the pocket. Johnny Manziel, he's running around in college. He couldn't outrun a linebacker in the NFL. That's a problem. But if your go-to is accuracy and you complete nearly 80% in camp, I know it's not the end of the world. But isn't it fair to say nobody else in this league is completing that percentage?
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Listen, the future is a whole bunch of right nows, and that's all you can do is right now. For Shedeur, right now in college, he did a great job. So far in camp, I've been very impressed. And I'm not somebody that gets, you know, all worked up over what someone looks like in, you know, helmet and T-shirt. But Shedeur has been very impressive. It's a really complicated and intriguing quarterback room. Obviously, you've got too many guys there right now, never mind the Deshaun Watson situation, but 4 guys in that room. When you're only going to keep 2, maybe 3, someone's got to go. And all 4 guys could actually, you know, I think you could make the argument that all 4 guys could give them the best chance as a starter.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Colin Cowherd actually makes a good point about the best trait in college translating to the NFL, and if that does, that's good things. The bad thing is nobody cares how much you complete. 80% completion percentage in shorts and T-shirts. When they start playing in shorts and T-shirts, then you can start paying attention to what they do in rookie minicamp. The Guardians, let's turn our attention to them. They are limping around on a West Coast trip. They've lost 8 of their last 10 games. They're now 9.5 behind the Tigers in the AL Central, and they are trailing the Red Sox with a pack of teams for the final wild card spot in the American League for that last wild card spot. Problem has been their offense. Take a look at these numbers. This is since May 24th. That was when they won their 3rd straight against the Detroit Tigers. They are 6-13 since then. They've been shut out 4 times in that span. They've scored less than 4 runs 11 times. They've scored 4 runs 4 more times. What it means is they are getting no offensive ability, and it's bad. The Guardians will start a 3-game series tonight in San Francisco against the Giants. Slade's Coney on the mound facing Robbie Ray for the Giants. Some news from the All-Star game. Stephen Vogt has been invited to be a part of the American League's coaching staff by Aaron Boone. So congratulations to Stephen Vogt, the manager of the Guardians, can be a part of the American League coaching staff this year. ESPN's national basketball analyst Brian Windhorst with what he's hearing about some trade discussions involving the Cavs.
Do I talk to people who say that they may trade Okoro or they may trade Wade? Yes, that is definitely something that I have heard. That the Cavs have investigated that. But, you know, you got to really look at this team. They believe that this team can win the whole thing. You know, that's the point. And so if you believe that, then you should operate that way. So I would be surprised they would be able to offload Okoro, especially without incentivizing. What I mean by that is giving something else, because he's got, you know, a fair amount of money left. And, you know, if you're not sending anything back, if you're just straight absorbing the contract, I'm not sure that team would do that. I think you could do that with Wade because he makes considerably less.
We will talk Cavs coming up with Sam Amico from hoopswire.com a little later in the show. Time for us to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we're talking Browns with Quincy Carrier. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Browns are up first on Sports4CLE. ESPN's NFL insider Adam Schefter with the Browns starting quarterback for Week 1.
There's been one quarterback drafted in the third round or later that's wound up winning the starting quarterback job on opening day, and that was Dak Prescott in 2016. Now, that doesn't mean that Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel can come on, play well, and work their way towards that starting job even early in the season. But I think it would be a upset if Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett is not the Browns' opening day starting quarterback. And then you hope that one of these young guys can develop, play well enough to win that starting job. Like Russell Wilson was a third-round pick, and he started. And that was a year in which they signed Matt Flynn in free agency. And I think they also traded for Charlie Whitehurst. And a lot of people thought that Flynn or Whitehurst would start. But Russell Wilson was so good and so dominant in training camp that he took the decision away from them because he clearly won that job. That's the level at which Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel would have to play at this summer. And that's not to say that they can't do it. But it's been so exceedingly rare over the last 40 years to see a quarterback drafted in those slots do that. And I think that there's going to be plenty to learn, and there's going to be time for them to compete. And I won't be surprised if one, maybe both, wind up starting at some point this season. But I don't expect that to be Week 1.
Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns Coverage. Quincy, what about it? I get exactly what he's saying. How do you think this shakes out relative to Week 1 for the Browns?
Yeah, I question whether starting that first stretch of the season is truly the prize that people are making it out to be. You look at those first 6 games, the Browns play literally every team was in the playoffs except for the Bengals, and the one team that didn't make the playoffs, as I said, was the Bengals, right? Who's not a normal non-playoff team. So do you really want to throw a rookie out there, even if you like him a lot throughout camp? I think that's a conversation we're going to eventually have to have. I think a lot of people talking about the Shedeur Sanders thing and him starting Week 1 haven't really looked at the schedule yet, if I'm being honest with you, right? Because I think you'll be able to tell because we'll be reviewing these clips in August, right? And people look at the schedule finally, and then all of a sudden, same people telling you got to start it right now are going to be wanting to pump the brakes. But yeah, what Adam said there is true. Like these guys who come out these late rounds aren't. It's not predictable. Nobody saw Dak Prescott coming, right? I think some people might have saw Russ coming because he played baseball. He was like 24 years old. He was a little bit older than your standard rookie was at that time. And like, you know, the only thing he had against him was that he was short, right? Like that was really it. But nobody really factored in how much athleticism would come to help him in the next coming years. But yeah, these aren't things that you look at and go, oh, it's guaranteed he's going to do what Russell did, when Russell's like one of like, what, how many quarterbacks get drafted in the late rounds to have ever done it? Same thing with Dak Prescott. A lot of people are just expecting the most rare result in the NFL to happen. And I think that's an unfair expectation to put on Shedeur Sanders. And it's not going to be a productive expectation for him, right? I think there's a lot of room for this guy to be a good quarterback. But if you put Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, rookie training camp expectations on him, and he falls short of that, it's not going to put him in a successful environment.
So how do you think Joe Flacco, if it is Joe Flacco, how do you think that he goes about winning the job for week 1?
You know, it's interesting, right? Because Joe Flacco's like a wrestling champion where I don't think he wins the job outright. I think he's the dude who retains the job if nobody else wins it. What I mean is if Kenny Pickett does not make you say during camp, yeah, he's got to start, then it's probably going to be Joe Flacco. Right? Like, if all else is looking pretty unappealing for the Cleveland Browns, you don't want to start rookies against that slate you have to go against at the beginning of the season. But you do want to start a veteran, but Kenny Pickett doesn't look amazing. You're like, all right, let's go with Joe, right? Because Joe knows the division. Joe's not going to be afraid of defenses. Joe's going to take the attack downfield. I think he serves as a nice bridge option. I think you would want to pair Joe with the rookies also looking solid in camp. And I think that's kind of how you get to Joe, because Kenny just doesn't take it from him, right? I think they want to give the job to Kenny Pickett, but if Kenny Pickett does not like outright earn the job in camp, then I don't think he's going to just like be rewarded it just because. I think that's exactly what Joe Flacco's there for.
So do you think they keep all 4 of these guys? Is there a way you can see them keeping all 4 quarterbacks? That's kind of become a topic this week.
It's my favorite topic, right? Everybody's thinking about all these different ways, right? But I think it's very simple. You can just look at the Browns' past, right? How do the Browns maintain keeping 4 quarterbacks? They've done this before. Okay, here's what I think is going to happen, Dave. You tell me what you think about this. You're going to keep probably either Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett. I would say Joe Flacco, right? That's my guess. You keep Joe Flacco. You keep the 2 rookies. Maybe all 4 make the 53-man roster, but when we're talking about week 1 active roster, those are going to be the 3 quarterbacks: Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders. Now, Kenny Pickett will still be on the Cleveland Browns as a practice squad guy, right? I don't know how much of a market there's going to be for Kenny Pickett. I know the Browns traded a 5th-round pick for him. You know, maybe there's somebody who wants to go get you some Kenny Pickett. Maybe after the draft, you know, people drafted spots there, so there's not going to be a lot of demand for him. So I think there's a chance that you could get Kenny Pickett on the practice squad. If you get Kenny Pickett back on the practice squad, it'd be a situation like we've seen with Joe Flacco, where Joe Flacco's kind of the backup if somebody goes down during the week and you need to replace him and put a new starter in, and you don't want to play a rookie, right? He's not going to be active during game day, but he could be the emergency quarterback as well. But I think it's going to end up in some form of rookie, veteran, and then a veteran on the practice squad. It's kind of the backup for like the first half of the season.
I could definitely see that happening. All right, let's
get ready, Dave. We're going to have to explain practice squad rules again.
Exactly. Yep. The veterans have different rules than the rookies. Offensive line. So you've had veteran offensive linemen. We've heard Joel Bitonio, we've heard Jack Conklin come out and talk how this is like 2021, 2020. And they sound excited by it. And they sound excited and re-energized by the offensive line coach. How important is that?
I think it's excitement about having an identity, right? Like football teams, and especially offensive linemen, they want an identity in order to know what they need to lean on in tough situations. And last year, on top of a lot of things, right? Last year felt like the weirdest Stefanski year that we've been through because you didn't feel like that team had an identity. Like even with Jacoby Brissett out there, the bad Baker Mayfield year we got in 2021, the good Baker Mayfield year we got in 2020, and the randomness that was 2023, you always felt like the Browns had an identity on offense, especially, right? Like they were going to be known for doing this. People talk about what the Browns do. They're one of those Shanahan teams. And then last year, we were kind of this Frankenstein monster of an offense that didn't do anything well. It didn't have an identity. And I think that's what everybody's excited about, is that we're really doubling down on that identity as a football team, right? They're going to play smash mouth football. They spent their 5th pick of the draft on the defensive line. They spent their 2nd round pick, their 33rd selection, 1st pick of the 2nd round on a linebacker. They spent their next 2nd round pick on a running back, right? They drafted 2 running backs, a tight end, a defensive tackle, a linebacker. You tell me what they trying to do, right? Like it's all guys in that box. And I think that's what everybody's excited about is, hey, we have our identity. We're going back to what our identity used to be. And not only are we going back, we have added new pieces that signify a long-term commitment to that identity.
So the other thing that we heard, and you mentioned Harold Fannin, so that's the tight end. We heard Dylan Sampson has been working in the slot with Chad O'Shea, the wide receiver coach. Do those two things kind of lessen the impact of what looks to be kind of a thin wide receiving core? Are they going to work around the lack of numbers that they have at wide receiver by doing those kind of things?
Yeah, I think this is going to be kind of similar to what Baltimore does, right? Where Baltimore, they know they're going to throw the ball almost like 450 times a year, sometimes even less than that, right? So there's going to be the targets for some of the big names. Mark Andrews is going to get his targets. Likely he's going to get his targets. Same thing with Zay Flowers. But what they cut down on is a lot of the depth on the wide receiver position because there's not really going to be room for your 5th guy to get 50 targets, right, when you're only throwing the ball 450 times. Now, the Browns won't be that extreme because they don't have a quarterback who can run it 120 times like Baltimore does. They're going to have to throw the ball probably close to about 500, 520 times. But the 2 best players on this offense are Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku. So the Browns are going to throw the ball, but they're just going to throw the ball a lot to those guys, right? Like that's going to be where this is focused. It's going to be very top heavy, right? Because why would you take Jerry Jeudy out the offense when he's one of the few Pro Bowlers you have? Same thing with David Njoku. So their targets are going to go up. The people like Jamari Thrash, maybe even Cedric Tillman, those targets do go down, right? So they're going to throw the ball about 500, 520 times if Kevin Stefanski's track record is to be believed on this, which he's done it, 3 out of 4 years? He's about 500, 520 times he throws the ball. It's just going to be more concentrated on getting the ball to those impact players. So I would expect a lot of targets for Jerry Jeudy, a lot of targets for David Njoku. I would think a decent amount of targets for Cedric Tillman because somebody does have to get those wide receiver 2 targets. And then, you look at it, Harold Fannin Jr., right? He's going to be in that pecking order. Quinshon Judkins is going to be in the pecking order. Jerome Ford's going to be in the pecking order. Same thing with Dylan Sampson, right? Like, you look down the list, if you look at the Browns' options as pass catchers and not just wide receivers, then you start to see where it's like there's not going to be a ton of people that are going to get carries in that targets in that wide receiver room. And I think that's why the room feels so weak to us because we're running 5 wide like last year, and we're going to really use, a 4th wide receiver a lot. And we're going to expect Elijah Moore to get like 600 yards. The Browns are hoping to get a lot out their top 2 receivers, and everybody else is everybody else.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll get some takeaways from minicamp, talk a little bit about the rookies. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, $10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. After mandatory minicamp was done, the rookie class hosted a football camp for elementary school kids. The kids interacted with all the rookies. Shedeur Sanders, one of the most popular with the kids, who were asking him plenty of questions.
When's your first game? The first game, the preseason game. Yes. Who are going against? Are you starting or still playing? Preseason? I don't know. Who's starting? Who's your first starting? We got preseason first. Yeah, is your homework today week 1? Oh, I don't know. Are you starting quarterback? Nobody knows.
And Quincy, those were not Browns beat reporters' children asking him who's starting, him or Joe Flacco. Those are just elementary school kids that want to know.
Yeah, those are good old days to be a Browns fan. We were just excited. Super fun to see that. Super fun to see Shedeur get involved there, and all the other Browns rookies that were also involved in that event. Super fun to see them there. It's going to be interesting to see what the Browns do here. But just remember, they play Cincinnati, Baltimore, Green Bay, at Detroit, Minnesota, in London, and then at Pittsburgh after they go to London. Hey, man, if I were a Shedeur fan, I'd be happy with somebody else playing the first 6 weeks of the season and happily jump in against Miami.
I'm with you. I am with you. What are some of the things, what are some of your takeaways from minicamp? So minicamp wrapped up before, the day before that event was hosted. Some of your takeaways.
Yeah, it felt like the Browns are on time right now, right? Last year, we did not get that vibe at all, right? We were on this show like, yeah, they're shutting down training camp, mini camp. They, Deshaun had like one of those weird things where they just like took him out of drills completely. A lot of start-stopping because of positional misalignments and all of that. And you could just feel the grind that training camp was going to have to be to get back on track. And clearly, the Browns never got back on track, right, from that slow start. Now it feels like there's a lot of positive momentum. Everybody seems happy about what they're doing. There seems to be nobody who's obviously incompetent at this point, which it seems like there were several people last year, when you look back at it, that must have been screaming incompetence at this point, because like the Browns pretty much parted ways immediately after the season, and in some points distanced themselves from these people during the season, right? If you know who those people are, but that's where they were last year. You could just see that they were going to need a really good camp in order to get back on track. Now you're watching them, and it just feels like business as usual, right? Nobody's been arrested. There's been no story about anybody getting injured, or there's no camp holdouts. Browns camp is pretty actually uneventful outside of people overanalyzing what's going on between quarterbacks and 7-on-7s. And I think that's a good place to be at, right? Like, that's where you want to be at OTAs. Nobody's doing anything that makes me think that they're going to alter the season. Saw Miles out there. He looks faster and bigger. Okay, cool. DeJuan Jones looks thinner. Like, there's no this guy's overweight story. Like, think about the lack of usual stuff that we're talking about in OTAs that we're not talking about this year. We're just like, so razor focus on Shedeur and Dillon. In part, the reason we can be that focused on them is because the Browns are doing literally nothing else to distract us from that. I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, without question. You and I have talked about Andrew Berry and his ability to draft, and fans have a lot of questions. You look at the rookies here. How many of these guys, and there's a number of them that could have huge impacts. In order to quell the questioners and the naysayers, how many of these guys legitimately have to pop for people to to believe Andrew Berry is doing a good job building this roster?
The number is way less than people ever really think when they do this on paper, because like people are like, you drafted 7 guys, at least 5 of them have to hit in order for you to be a good GM. And that's not really the truth, right? If Mason Graham becomes an all-pro, you get a Pro Bowler out of like Quinshon Judkins, we're going to always look back at this draft and be like, man, that was an incredible draft. Case in point, let's look at the 2018 draft, right? If we look at that draft, Browns had 2 first-round picks in the top 5, Dave, in the top 5, and then they had 2 second-round picks also in the top 5 of that round. Now, the Browns ended up with 2 players they ended up giving long-term contracts to. We know the names of those guys, Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb. Do you ever hear about Austin Corbett when people are talking about how amazing of a GM John Dorsey was? No, you never hear about Austin Corbett or what was the dude named, the wide receiver that we took from Florida, Antonio Callaway?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Fifth round. Yeah.
Those things get swept under the rug when you draft Nick Chubb and you get Denzel Ward, right? So my rule of thumb is if you get 2 guys who are all pros or Pro Bowlers, or long-time Pro Bowlers, right? Because making 1 Pro Bowl don't really count. Like if you get like multiple Pro Bowler, and an All-Pro guy, people aren't going to really care what happened with the rest of the draft.
The other thing is you got 2 running backs, you got the tight end. You got a lot. You got the linebacker. There are a number of guys. Those are guys that can make impacts that are felt as opposed to linemen and those kind. It's harder for a lineman to kind of pop, if you will.
Yeah, and I think running back especially, right? Like you, there's no denying if a running back's good or not. And obviously, it took 2 quarterbacks. If one of those guys hits, then it doesn't even matter what happens with the rest of the draft. But here's the thing too about what Andrew Berry can do to prove himself is the big criticism about Andrew isn't that he's not been able to find starters. You look at those drafts. The issue isn't that there's not a lot of starters in those drafts. There actually are quite a lot of starters in Andrew Berry's draft. Is that he hasn't gotten anybody to add to the core list of impact players that this team has had, right? This team's core has been Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, and Nick Chubb pretty much since 2018. And Andrew Berry, whether it be because of the draft selections he's had or his ability to draft, has not added anybody to that core. If you add a player in this year's draft to that core of folk, right? Obviously, Nick Chubb's out, but if Quinshawn replaces him in that core, or if Mason Graham joins Myles Garrett in that core, that's the one thing on Andrew's jacket that he gets to clear, because that's the main criticism, is that he hasn't added one of those level of guys in this draft, and that all those guys come from either Sashi Brown drafts or John Dorsey drafts.
So, what are your thoughts about the early returns with the trade with Travis Hunter, the trade back that got you Mason Graham?
There's no denying that the Browns absolutely saw the opportunity and really are happy with what they got there, right? Like I was listening to an interview between James Gladstone and Andrew Berry on Ron Carthon's podcast, which is like new media is amazing that you get to have those 2 talk to each other in public. But it's funny because James Gladstone, the Jaguars GM, mentions that, hey, man, we were interested in Travis Hunter at the owners meeting. And I just remember being on this show talking about a clip from Andrew Berry at the owners meeting talking about how he thinks Travis Hunter is the greatest thing to ever live. And I'm like, wow, he was really working on this one for a long time. So this is undoubtedly what the Browns wanted to do. I think they got their number 1 option with the number 2 overall pick was to get to a next year's pick and then get a top 5 selection. I think this is what the Browns' number 1 option was with the number 2 overall pick. So they got that. Their number 1 option clearly wasn't drafting Travis Hunter. If they would have taken him. I think this is their best case scenario. Let's see what they do with that best case scenario. But it's pretty clear to me that this is what they've wanted to do all along.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
Thank you.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Great Browns coverage. It's untitled and unfiltered. He is on YouTube. Make sure you go find him. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tom Withers, straight up. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE, ESPN's national football reporter Jeremy Fowler with what he's hearing, how the Browns feel about their quarterback competition.
This was fascinating because I was told Kevin Stefanski's plan for his 4 quarterbacks in OTAs and minicamp was to try to get a lot of different guys, different touches in different situations, and they all really answered the bell, including Sanders, who showed the ability to put the ball in some tight windows. He threw with aggressiveness, took some chances, so they like where he sits. Now Stefanski has to formulate a plan in training camp that's probably a little more crystallized, maybe has a little bit of a depth chart to it. They are not there yet, but Sanders has made an impression, there's no doubt.
Let's welcome in longtime Browns, Cavs, Guardians reporter Tom Withers. Tom, what are you paying attention to now that they're going to come back and put pads on? What are you paying attention to early in that relative to the quarterback competition?
I think as Jeremy mentioned, maybe the way that Kevin Stefanski divvies up the reps, right? I think it's going to be fascinating, and I think it's going to probably change on almost a day-to-day basis as to, who's out there with the ones, who's out there with the twos, et cetera. How many snaps does Joe Flacco get in the red zone versus Shedeur? Are Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur actually splitting the reps? What does this mean for Kenny Pickett? I think this is, we've had I don't have to tell you, we've had a lot of quarterback talk in this town for the better part of 30 years now. And I don't remember many situations where we literally had kind of a 4-horse race here heading into summer camp. So I think initially, Dave, I'm going to be very interested to see how Stefanski and his staff decide to split this up so everybody gets a fair shake, because that's exactly what you want.
Yeah, and to be honest, I would think in order for Shedeur or Dylan to get that job, they're just going to have to be like, wow, we didn't, these guys, you have to be so much better than the other guys. In order for me to say you're, as a rookie, the guy that I'm going to give the opening snap to week 1.
I'm with you 100%. I think that's why you saw Kenny Pickett signed as one of the first moves of the offseason. That's why you saw Joe Flacco brought back for a second go-around. I think a lot of us wish that had happened a year ago, but so be it. It's really something, Dave. And I think, as I said before, I think the good thing for the Browns is that they have 4 legitimate options here. I think you could make not a strong case, but you could make a case for any of them finding their way to the starting job. As we know in this town, the line moves at the quarterback position. Injuries are going to happen. That's also going to be the case at other camps around the league. So, as we get deeper into camp, keep an eye on, who's looking for a quarterback, and does that affect the Brown situation? Does suddenly Kenny Pickett become a guy that maybe is, on some other team's radar, and the Browns want to shop him? Who knows? Again, I don't think that either Gabriel or Sanders are necessarily front runners by any means to win the starting job, but stranger things have happened. And to your point, Dave, if one of them really plays well, not only in camp, but during the exhibition games, during the practices against other teams, then the team is going to have to take a really deep look at, rather than, wasting a year and not knowing what these kids are about, because we're going to play either Pickett or Flacco or Pickett, however it shakes out. Do we give one of them a crack right out of the gate? I think, there can be an argument made for that, what's the point of waiting at this point? If you got to figure out, if this year is about figuring out who your quarterback is, then either Gabriel or Sanders has to get a legitimate shot, and that means they play.
So former NFL player Gerard Cherry, should the players have an input on the starting quarterback? That's what he was asked.
How much, if at all, should the players have a say in who is the starting quarterback?
None at all. It's not your job as a player to be making those. It's not your job to make those type of decisions. So when it's time for cut down days, how's that going to work? Because if you did have that type of say, there'd be a major problem. Because all of a sudden now you're playing the role of GM. So none whatsoever.
Gerard, even with you saying no, the players shouldn't have any sort of say, but they should have some sort of input, right?
I never, as a player, would want to be in a position where I'm letting another player in which I'm competing for a job with have influence on whether or not I get the job. I just can't see that coexisting and working.
So, Tom, I agree, but here's what I would say. The players have to feel whomever your quarterback is gives you the best chance to win. And the coach can't come and say, and I'm pointing to last year where we kept hearing Deshaun Watson gives us the best chance of winning. I don't think many people in that locker room believe that 6, 7 weeks into when Kevin Stefanski was saying it.
I don't think a lot of media members felt that way, Dave, even coming out of training camp. I mean, we watched Deshaun Watson and his inability to throw the ball down the field, and we're even saying to ourselves, why is this guy starting? He shouldn't be playing. They have other options. They need to use them. So I'm with Gerard. Let coaches coach, let players play, let GMs GM, let them all do their things. I think there is something to be said, though, that players are going to know when you're out on the practice field who's performing the best. That's at every position. So, players are going to have a good sense of who should be out there. That doesn't always equate to who necessarily gets the job because of various factors. You have, coaches coaching for their lives. You have owners with too much input and emphasis on who they want to be starting. We've seen that situation here in Cleveland in the past. So you got to hope that, and you got to put the trust in Stefanski and his staff that they are going to, go through the process, the best way that they see fit, that they end up picking the best guy for the job at this point for this team at this point, and then you roll with whoever that might be.
Yeah, and when you think about it, Myles Garrett, Joel Bitonio, you have some veterans that kind of – Joel Bitonio, this might be his last year. Myles Garrett in the offseason told you, I feel like my career is ticking away here. So you have to – that has to figure into who you are starting at least early in the season.
Yeah, I think it does factor in. I think that's something that coaches would consider. I think that's part of having a team, right? You got to factor in all those things. You take a look at – people want to talk about how the Guardians are struggling right now, and people are talking about – well, they're wasting some of Jose Ramirez's best seasons. That happens, right? If a team is not prepared to have players that complement a star player. I think this Browns team does have better players than that their 3-14 record indicated last year. And I think that does factor in when a coach is making a decision. But it can't be the be-all and end-all. You cannot let, whether it's a star offensive guard or arguably the best defensive player in the NFL influence who you're going to put behind center. That's a recipe for disaster. So listen, players are going to talk to coaches. Coaches are going to listen to players. There's always going to be some influence, kind of figure out how much it can play in at times, depending on how strong people's personalities are, how strong people's convictions are about somebody playing. But as I said before, I think the Browns are at least in a good situation in that they've got 4 pretty good options. They've got in Kenny Pickett, a guy who's trying to get a second chance or actually a third chance and prove that he belongs in this league as a starter. We all know what Joe Flacco can do. 40 years old, proven record, Super Bowl MVP, took this Browns team to the playoffs 2 years ago, right? And then Gabriel and Sanders, you have 2 young players who both have all kinds of upside and all kinds of intangibles that make you think that both can have long careers in the NFL. So, like I said, I think the Browns are in a pretty good situation, and let the best man win.
All right, so David Njoku, tight end, mic'd up during mandatory minicamp. Let's listen in.
Joe Flacco! Flacco! Flacmania. That's a great name.
You like it?
Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett. Go!
Jump cut. Oh, big man.
Damn. I got a touchdown, so I got.
I'm going to run this like a team, and I'm going to catch you for a touchdown.
And what I do?
That's what happens.
Just that.
Our placement is just outstanding. If we could just get a tight end to catch it at some point.
Just throw it to me. I'm going to take the rest. Just throw it up. I'll take the rest.
You better not put that blick up if you score. You see Coach got on you. Got on me.
On you, not me. I didn't do that. I slam it. You be playing with the Browns. You know what I do? I'm Madden, yeah.
3 steps high. More eyes.
You look real handsome, man. Real handsome. You know, I'm mic'd up.
You know, the interesting thing is we've seen a number of those, and the veterans seem to like Shedeur Sanders. That's just an interesting takeaway. There's going to be some of that, but there's a lot of it with him.
I'm glad they never mic'd me up, by the way, at training camp. That would probably be dangerous. Yeah, he seems to have, he's one of those guys that guys gravitate to, right? And obviously, everybody knows about him, right? I mean, you'd have to have been not paying attention over the last couple of years not to know the Shedeur Sanders story. So he seems to be a likable kid. I've been impressed with everything that he's done to this point. He's got a lot of pressure on him. Seems to handle that very well. Obviously, the son of a Hall of Fame player, that comes with enough pressure as it is. And in terms of Njoku, that he's an interesting cat, man. I've grown to like David over the years. He's had some ups and downs as a player, been pretty productive. Sometimes where you kind of wonder if his head is in it and in all the right places, but still seems to get the job done. Grown into a leader on that team. I mean, we saw him come here as, I think he was like 18 or 19 when the Browns drafted him out of Miami years ago, and has had a nice little run here. So, but in terms of Sanders, again, I think it's a guy that everybody wants to be around. He's going to bring you in some extra followers on Instagram or whatever just by your association with him. And I think guys like the fact that he's worked hard. I mean, you've even heard, Stefanski and Flacco and other players talk about that he seems to be, willing to learn, not coming in with any big ego, and he could understandably have one given all the notoriety he's had, coming out of college. But again, I've been impressed with everything about the kid so far.
Tom Withers and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit more about the offense and a little about the defense. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Tom Withers. Longtime Browns beat reporter Tony Grossi asked about Quinshon Judkins.
1,000 yards for Quinshon. Tony, over or under?
Easy. Over. The commitment is there. The commitment is there for the offense to run the ball again. And you know what I've said. I think Quinshon Judkins is the real deal and will live up to it.
So, Tom, what are your thoughts? If Judkins gains, 1,300 yards, has 8 or 9 touchdowns, which is very, very possible, maybe even likely, should be pretty good things for this offense. What do you think about Judkins?
Yeah, I'm just worried about the Nick Chubb chance down there for Judkins early in the season because I think people are still having a hard time dealing with that separation. But listen, as a shameless Ohio State Buckeye honk, I was all in favor of that pick. I like Judkins a lot. I was talking to somebody the other day. I really felt like his addition last year to that Ohio State team had a lot to do with them winning the national championship. It allowed them to keep Travion Henderson fresh. Gave that offense a 1-2 punch that I think the Browns are going to try to get with him and Sampson here going forward. But I like the kid a lot. He runs hard. A little bit of a real north-south runner, but once he gets to that second level, he does have the breakaway speed, catches the ball pretty well, and an excellent blocker. And I think sometimes, we talk about running backs and we want to give them the ball and we want to see him pick up 6 or 7 yards a carry, but it can be just as important to have a guy that's in there that knows how to pick up a blitz, that can knock somebody on their rear end when they need him to. And so I think Judkins brings kind of a toughness to that room. I also think that in taking 2 rookie running backs, you're going to put some more pressure on Jerome Ford, who I still have high hopes for. I think he's still a pretty competent back, and still think that they can use him in a number of ways, not only on kickoff returns, but on third downs. I mean, he's shown that he can catch the ball out of the backfield. So, much like the quarterback situation, I like the Browns' options there as much as I'd still wish that number 24 was around.
Yeah, how do you think that the splits are? Do you think it's Judkins, Sampson, and Ford? And do you think are the carries fairly well evenly distributed, or?
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen. You could see a 50-50 split, but if one of them gets hot, then you ride with that guy, right? Dave, I mean, I think we saw that the last couple of years when the Browns were going, gangbusters there, and they had both Nick and Kareem Hunt. They could split it up as they needed to, and if one guy was having a good game, then stick with him. And then if you needed to give him a spell and bring the other guy in the third or fourth quarter, then you do that. So again, I think it's a nice luxury to have. I think you got two backs, like I said before, with Judkins and with Sampson, that that both can run away from people, that they can make them miss, they can run them over, and then once they get in the open field, they can take off and go. And that's a luxury the Browns can't afford not to have.
What are going to be some of the keys for this offense? We're going to assume that the quarterback play will be average.
Yeah.
It's not going to be elite. I don't think we have an elite quarterback there. So what are the keys for this offense?
Get that offensive line going again. I think a lot was made in the offseason about, going back to some of that wide scheme that was successful for Stefanski a couple of years ago. Dave, I'll be honest with you, and I hope Browns fans feel the same way. You got to take that 3-14 season and kind of flush it in a lot of ways. There were a lot of things going on that were really out of people's hands, whether it was the change with the offensive coordinator, whether it was, trying to finally, or for the last time, force Deshaun Watson down everybody's throat, if you will. It was just a bad season. Then the injuries started to mount. But in my mind, the first thing that's got to happen is that offensive line has got to play with some toughness and some cohesion and stay as injury-free as possible. Excuse me. Those things are going to happen. That's just in the course of any season. But I think, Bitonio coming back, DeJuan Jones getting in better shape, Postage hopefully coming back from what was a tough year for him. Wyatt Teller, who I know is always playing through something, keeping him healthy for the year. And Jack Conklin building off of what was a remarkable comeback season for a veteran player. So in my mind, I think the foundation really has to begin up front. And then obviously you got to hope that Jerry Jeudy can build off what was a breakout season for him. You got to hope that Cedric Tillman can continue to develop. And then you got to hope with Njoku and in Harold Fannin Jr., the rookie out of Bowling Green that they've been really high on, you've got a situation where you can play them in 12 personnel packages, where you can get the most out of that 2 tight end system that Kevin Stefanski has loved since the day he was born. And one of the reasons that he came here from Minnesota was to implement that kind of a system here. We've seen it work before. You got to hope that it can work again.
All right, let's flip sides of the ball. Defense. Top 2 picks, surprised me, top 2 picks were on defense. In the middle of that defense, how good do you think the defense can be?
Let's hope that it's better. I think there's still a lot of questions to be answered. I did like the pick of Graham. I really, while watching Michigan over the last couple of years, he always stood out to me. Not necessarily a super flashy player, but somebody who was always around the ball, pretty sure tackler, seemed to have a little bit of a nasty streak about him, which is always needed in any defense. Schlesinger kid we don't know a ton about from UCLA, but obviously a huge need, especially given what's happened to JOK and in his unfortunate situation. So, God, this defense has got to be better, Dave. They've got to be much better in shortening the field and getting turnovers. They were unable to do that last year. I know that Jim Schwartz recently talked about Denzel Ward and the fact that he probably should have had a dozen interceptions last year, and that could have changed things remarkably, right? So I think they've just got to be as aggressive as they've been in the past, try to turn the ball over a little bit more, try to shorten that field, make things easier for the offense, and just be better all around. And Garrett coming back, I think this is a year where Myles Garrett really has to, not that he hasn't taken it to another level several times, but I think given everything that's happened to him over the last year with I want out, I want a new contract, I got a new contract, I'm the best player in the league. He needs to show that on a week in, week out basis, Dave. And that doesn't mean at the end of the year you look at it and say, oh, he had 18 sacks, he had another great year. When did those sacks come? when the Browns needed a stop on a third down late in the game, did Myles Garrett come up with that play? That's what I think he needs to start doing now. That's what Hall of Fame players do. And I think that's on Myles Garrett this year to lead that defense and get them turned around again.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think Mace Graham might help him more than some people think. I think having that tackle next to him, something that he hasn't really had a lot with the Browns. Tom Withers, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Tom.
Always nice talking to you, Dave. Thanks very much.
Tom Withers, a long-time Cleveland reporter with his insights on the Browns. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com, Full Court Cleveland. Straight ahead. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Sports4CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA. Let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com, as well as Full Court Cleveland. So, Sam, big news in the NBA. Desmond Bane traded to the Orlando Magic. What impact does it have on the Cavs, if any? And then second part of that is, what about the price Orlando paid to that relative to what the Cavs gave up to get Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, first of all, with the Cavs, how it impacts them. You look at Orlando, which was a team that shot 31% this past season on threes. Well, Desmond Bane is a 42% three-point shooter for his career. So immediately they've improved in that area. They saw a need, pretty desperate to score points, as we saw in the playoffs against the Celtics for the Magic. On paper, this makes them better because now you're surrounding Banchero and Franz Wagner with a shooter, an outside shooter, and that's where they were really hurting. And you look at how they kind of went about it. As you just said, the Magic, they gave up so much to get him, but they don't really view it as that much because you're talking Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who didn't offer any offense for them, or very limited offense. Cole Anthony, who sort of struggled last season, and then four first-round picks. But the Magic are viewing that as, okay, we're going to finish in the 25 to 30 range over the next few years. So the three of those first-round picks aren't that big of a deal to Orlando, assuming everything goes as planned. But, it's that fourth pick, which is going to be the lesser of the Suns-Wizards pick, that the Magic are sending to the Grizzlies. That could be a lottery pick next year, and that's why Memphis made that deal. So how does that impact the Cavs? Well, you look at it, the window, everybody is saying we can be next year's Pacers. The Orlando Magic are now saying that. The Cavs have been saying that. The Knicks can say it. Maybe the Philadelphia 76ers will pull it together. Milwaukee Bucks. All these teams are saying the window is wide open, so let's strike now and fix some of our needs. And, hey, look, the Magic have a case. They could be the next year's Pacers. So could the Cavs. So could the Knicks. So could the Sixers. They all could lose in the first round, too. And I think that's why teams are repurposing to try to give themselves, some hope going into next year, knowing that window wide open.
Do you see any of the, the big four, the core four, however you want to refer to them, of the Cavs being traded? Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, or Allen?
I don't. Not right now. Garland, I thought it seems like, and we've seen the reports from Chris Fedor at cleveland.com that the Cavs are more open this year to moving either Garland or Allen than they were last summer. That doesn't mean they're determined to move them, just means they're probably more willing to listen. I don't think that the Cavs will find a deal for either of those players. And I don't think the Cavs are calling people saying, what do you give us for Garland or Allen? I think they're just taking those calls and listening. But, those are hard guys to move because they're very valuable. You finished 64-18. Garland was clearly compromised with that injury during the playoffs. It's not going to be, it's not somebody, you don't feel desperate to move guys if you're the Cavs. You're just looking at it like, okay, we're going to listen to see if something knocks our socks off and move accordingly. And with that philosophy, I don't foresee any of those four. Certainly Mitchell and Mobley aren't being moved at all. I don't see Allen or Garland being moved during the offseason anyway.
So the other names that you've heard, Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, do you see them getting moved? And what would the Cavs, what could they get if it's an Okoro or a Wade or packaged together?
Yeah, that seems more likely to me. One of those two, those would be their main guys that they would be open to moving and maybe even making some calls on. Look, they know what they need, and that's a playable backup center power forward type who could play 15, 20 minutes a game. Nothing against Tristan Thompson, but if you're not going to play him, there's no sense in having him, or at least, you need to replace those minutes somehow, some way, and give Jared Allen and Evan Mobley a break. As we saw this last year, Kenny Atkinson had to platoon them and keep one on the floor at all times. Now you're looking for a Tony Bradley type, as we see with the Pacers, or a Thomas Bryant, a backup center that's physical that you could trade for and play 15, 20 minutes maximum a game just to give your other bigs a break. Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, the most logical pieces to go get somebody like that and not have to take back a ton of salary, obviously. And, Okoro, I think the Cavs are ready to start giving those minutes next year to Jalen Tyson. And that should immediately, you would think, add toughness and some of the other intangibles that they need.
So does the way the Pacers have played in the subsequent rounds of the playoffs get into the finals, if you're Kobe Altman, if you're Kenny Atkinson, does that make you feel any better about that loss in the second round?
Yeah, I think you still thought you should win that series if you're the Cavs, and who knows? Altman and Atkinson aren't going to say this or make excuses, but who knows what would have happened if Darius Garland, DeAndre Hunter, and Evan Mobley all didn't miss game 2 in Cleveland. Who knows what would have happened if Garland had not been injured. It was very clear that he was out there giving it a go when shortly after the series, he needed surgery on that big toe, and it was evident that he was in pain. I don't think they're using that as an excuse. Indiana's been fantastic. I would think that, you ran into a buzzsaw, and that's a good lesson. And the one that the Cavs learned is you've got to be playing your best and be at your most physical and your most mentally tough in May and June. The Pacers started 10-15. Right. And here they are now, obviously on the brink of elimination, but buzzed through the East. So I think that's something that the Cavs would find encouraging going into next season.
Before I let you go, do you get a sense, are they going to bring back, are they going to be able to bring back Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill, or do you think one of or both of those guys that they just can't, they get better deals somewhere in the NBA?
I think the great news for the Cavs is everybody, let me put it this way, no one has money to spend. Because of the new labor rules, everybody is up against the cap, except for maybe the Brooklyn Nets. The Detroit Pistons could make a couple of, not re-sign their own free agents to create more money. At the same time, I would be surprised if either of those teams or anybody who somehow gets cap space, as good as Ty Jerome was during the regular season, as good as Sam Merrill was, I don't think anybody's, they're not going to be their primary targets of opposing teams. So I do think that the Cavs stand a good chance to bring both of them back I think it'll be a lot better of a chance if they're able to unload. And I hate to say the word unload, but this is just the truth. If they're able to trade Dean Wade and create some money, or trade Isaac Okoro and create some money, or trade both, I think your odds of signing Jerome and Merrill are pretty good. I would say, to me, the way I look at it, it seems like it's about an 80% chance that both of them will return, with a window that you never know, that 20% of the unexpected.
Sam Amico, hoopswire.com, Full Court Cleveland. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Sam.
All right, thanks for having me. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Sam Amico, make sure you check him out, hoopswire.com, as well as Full Court Cleveland. Great Cavs coverage. Sam also covers the entire NBA. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.